I left her 7 years ago, thinking it was best, but when I came back, I discovered a secret she had kept hidden, and it changed everything. I stood at the gate of my parents' old house, gripping the handle of my small suitcase so tightly that my knuckles whitened. The wind blew sharply from the north, cutting across the narrow street like icy fingers, and I hugged my coat closer, wishing it could somehow shield me from the cold, and from the memories I had tried so hard to bury. 7 years. 7 long years had passed since I walked out of this town, leaving behind everything I knew. I had tried to escape the weight of my past, the mistakes I couldn't erase, and the person I used to be. But home had a way of finding you, no matter how far you ran. Mom opened the front door before I could even knock. She looked older, smaller somehow, though she tried to keep the same strong posture she always had. Her hair, streaked with grey, was tied into a bun. Her eyes, sharp and calculating as always, softened for only a brief second when they met mine, and then the steel returned. "Listen," she said quietly, motioning me inside. "You need to leave soon. Your sister is coming. She's bringing the kids. They'll be staying here for a while." Her words were calm, almost casual, but the meaning behind them hit me like a punch. I froze in the doorway, unable to respond. It was as if the walls themselves were telling me I no longer belonged here, that the space I had once called mine had been quietly erased while I was gone. I just came to rest for a bit," I managed to whisper, though the words sounded weak even to my own ears. Mom shook her head, a shadow of regret flashing across her face. "You'll have to find another place soon." "I'm sorry, it's just, the house isn't big enough for all of us now." Her words cut deeper than any argument ever could. I nodded slowly, trying to hide the pain, but I knew she could see it. She always could. I walked down the street, suitcase rolling over the uneven stones, and let the familiar sights wash over me. The town had changed slightly, but not completely. The bakery on the corner still smelled of fresh bread in the morning. The old bookstore had been replaced with a small cafe, its windows foggy with the breath of customers. The street seemed smaller than I remembered, like the town had shrunk while I was away. And then I saw her, Aisha. She was standing outside the small farmhouse she had taken over after her father passed. Her posture was straight, her hands tucked into the pockets of her worn coat. The sunlight fell behind her just right, making her hair look like molten gold. She hadn't noticed me yet, and I had the sudden, sharp awareness that she hadn't changed much, even if time had added a few lines around her eyes. My heart thumped wildly in my chest, a mix of fear and longing I hadn't felt in years. She was the reason I had left, the reason I had run. And yet, seeing her now, I realized I had never truly escaped her presence in my mind. When she finally saw me, her eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, she seemed frozen, as if she was trying to place me, to remember every detail. "You," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the breeze. "Yeah, me," I said softly. We stood there, facing each other across the dusty path, and for a while, neither of us spoke. The years seemed to compress into the silence, the distance between us suddenly charged with memories, regrets, and unspoken words. The last time I had seen Aisha, things had ended badly. I had left without explanation, without a goodbye, and I had hoped time would soften her anger or at least make my absence easier for her to accept. But looking into her eyes now, I realized time had not been kind in the way I had imagined. There was hurt there, yes, but also a strength I had not anticipated. "I heard you were gone," she finally said, folding her arms, her voice steady but her eyes betraying the turmoil beneath. "I was," I replied. "Now I'm here." The air between us felt heavy, almost impossible to breathe through. Every memory we shared pressed down like a weight on my chest. I remembered the afternoons we spent walking by the river, the nights talking under the stars, the laughter we shared that felt so safe in its simplicity. And I remembered the arguments, the misunderstandings, the pride that had kept us apart. "I didn't think you'd come back," she said quietly. "I didn't plan to," I admitted, my voice catching. "But I had nowhere else to go." Her lips pressed into a thin line, as if holding back something she didn't want me to see. The tension between us was palpable, filled with all the unsaid words of the past. I wanted to apologize, to explain, but every word felt too small to bridge the gap that 7 years had carved. She finally stepped aside, motioning toward the gate of the farmhouse. "You can stay for a while," she said, almost reluctantly. "Just don't expect things to be like they used to." Her words stung. The distance in her tone was sharper than any anger, more cutting than any insult I had ever received. I nodded silently, trying to mask the hurt, and followed her inside. The farmhouse smelled of wood smoke and earth, of bread baked early in the morning, of home, but a home that had moved on without me. The walls were filled with photographs, pictures of her smiling, her father, the small town's life continuing without pause. Everything I remembered was still here, yet it had changed, shaped by the years I had missed. We sat in silence at the small wooden table. She poured me a cup of tea, and the warmth of it seeped into my hands. The steam rose in the quiet room, twisting and curling like memories I could no longer hold. 7 years, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. Why did you leave? I didn't answer immediately. How could I explain the mix of fear, pride, and uncertainty that had driven me away? I wanted to say it was for the best, that I had needed to find myself, that I had thought I was protecting us both. But none of it sounded right anymore. I thought it was best, I said finally, my voice breaking slightly. For who? She asked, her eyes searching mine. Her question cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to tell her I had been selfish, that I had been scared, that I had been a coward. But instead, I just stared down at the table, listening to the tick of the clock, the soft creak of the floorboards, and the wind whispering through the cracks in the windows. There was a pause, heavy and long, filled with everything we hadn't said in years. She looked away, staring out of the window at the empty field beyond, the same field where we had once played as children, dreaming of futures we thought we could have together. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting shadows across the room. I realized then that this reunion, though painful, was necessary. It forced me to face the past, the choices I had made, and the person I had become. And deep down, I knew one thing with certainty. Aisha was not the same girl I had left behind. She was stronger now, wiser, and perhaps more guarded. But even through the years and the wall she had built around herself, there was something familiar in her gaze, something that belonged to both of us. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if she would forgive me, if we could ever rebuild what we had lost. But as I looked at her, standing there with her hands folded, the wind tangling her hair, I realized that this meeting was just the beginning. The story of us was far from over, and I was not ready to leave, no matter what my mother had said. The night was quiet, except for the occasional creak of the old farmhouse settling and the faint hum of a distant train. I sat at the small wooden table, staring into the dark tea that Aisha had poured for me. Steam curled lazily from the cup, and I could almost imagine it carrying the years we had lost, twisting and fading in the cool night air. She didn't sit immediately. Instead, she leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, eyes fixed somewhere beyond me. It felt as though she was weighing every word before she said it. The silence between us was thick, almost unbearable, yet neither of us broke it. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and cautious. You know, I never thought you'd come back. Not here. Not to this place. I didn't either, I admitted. I didn't plan on it. But I had nowhere else to go. Her gaze flicked toward me, sharp now, piercing in a way that made my chest tighten. There was more behind her eyes than hurt. There was suspicion, wariness, and something else I couldn't quite name. I thought I'd be okay, she said after a pause, voice trembling slightly. I thought 7 years would be enough for both of us to forget. You didn't, I whispered, my throat tight. Her lips pressed together, and she looked away. I had to pretend. I had to survive. You left, and the world kept moving. But I stayed here, waiting for something you never came back to give me. I swallowed hard. The guilt that had followed me like a shadow all these years suddenly felt heavier. I had left her alone, broken in ways I could never fully understand. I had run from fear, from responsibility, from love. And now, sitting here, facing her after all this time, I realized the damage was more than I could ever repair. I wasn't brave, I admitted. I was scared. I didn't know how to stay. I didn't know how to face you, or the future, or myself. Her eyes, now glistening with unshed tears, finally met mine. You think I haven't thought about you? Every day, I thought about what you were doing, where you were, who you were with. I hated you. I loved you. I hated you for leaving, and I loved you for leaving, because I needed to survive. And now you're here, and I don't know how to feel. The words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. I could feel every heartbeat, every throb of pain and longing, vibrating between us. I wanted to reach out, to take her hand, to tell her I was sorry in a way that would make a difference, but I knew that words alone would never be enough. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I watched her, noticing the small details I had missed before, the faint freckles across her nose, the tiny scar on her wrist, the way her shoulders carried a weight that was more than physical. She had grown, matured, survived. And yet, there was still a spark of the girl I had loved, hidden beneath the years and the walls she had built around herself. Then, almost abruptly, she laughed, a short, bitter sound that made my chest ache. Do you remember that day by the river? When we tried to skip stones, and you kept falling in? I smiled faintly, the memory bittersweet. I remember. You were furious, and yet, you saved me every time. Her smile faltered, and she looked away. And I waited for you to be there for me when it mattered. But you weren't. You never were. The silence returned, heavier this time. I could feel her emotions like electricity in the air. Anger, love, regret, and something darker, something she refused to name. It was obvious she was hiding something, something she had carried all these years, something that might change everything if I knew it. Why are you telling me this now? I asked quietly, my voice barely audible. Why after 7 years? She hesitated, biting her lip. Because I can't keep pretending anymore. Because seeing you here, it forces me to remember everything. And because I need you to know that leaving me changed more than you realize. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I know. I've been living with it every day. I thought I was protecting you by leaving, but all I did was hurt you. Her eyes flicked to the hallway suddenly, and I followed her gaze. There was a subtle tension in her body, a careful avoidance of something she didn't want me to notice. She shifted, as if covering a secret. My heart skipped. Something was off. Aisha, what is it? I asked gently. What are you hiding? She froze, her hands tightening around the edge of the table. For a moment, I thought she might laugh, or cry, or run, but she did none of those. She just shook her head. Nothing. Nothing at all. Her voice was too quick, too controlled. My gut told me she was lying. I had known her too long, seen too much of her, to believe her words without question. There was something in the way she moved, in the small, nervous gestures, that betrayed her calm facade. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. The wind outside rattled the window panes, carrying with it the faint smell of wood smoke and damp earth. I could feel the history of this house pressing down on us, the memories of laughter, fights, dreams, and betrayals. It felt alive, like it was listening, like it was aware of every secret and every pain. Look, I said carefully, I don't want to push you, but I need to know the truth. Whatever it is, I can handle it. Just don't hide it from me. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. Part of her wanted to tell me everything, to unload the secret she had carried for years. Part of her was terrified of what that truth might do to me, and to the fragile connection we were trying to rebuild in this one room. She began, then stopped, shaking her head. It's not that simple. You think 7 years is long, but it's not long enough to forget. Not for what's happened. Not for what you did. My heart sank. Her words hinted at something deeper, something that explained the weight I had felt in her gaze, the hesitation in her voice, the careful way she avoided certain topics. The air was thick with suspense, the unspoken secrets gnawing at both of us, threatening to spill over at any moment. For a while, we sat in silence again, the only sounds the ticking of the old clock on the wall and the faint creak of the floorboards under the weight of memories. I realized that whatever she was hiding, it had shaped her life in ways I could not yet understand. And I knew that when it came to light, everything between us would change. Then she spoke again, softer this time, almost a whisper. You shouldn't have come back. It will only make everything harder. Her words were careful, like a warning. But they were also a challenge, a signal that there was more waiting beneath the surface, something I was not yet ready to see. My chest tightened with anticipation, dread, and a flicker of hope all at once. I realized then that this conversation, this tension, this unspoken history, was far from over. Something had happened in the years I was gone. Something she had never told me. And whatever it was, It was about to change everything. As I watched her move toward the window, her silhouette bathed in moonlight, I knew one thing for certain. Aisha was hiding something. And the moment I discovered it, the past 7 years of pain, anger, and longing would finally collide with the present. The farmhouse, with its quiet walls and lingering memories, seemed to hold its breath. And so did I. The next morning, I woke to a strange quiet. The farmhouse felt different in the soft morning light, warmer somehow, yet tense, as if it, too, was waiting for something to happen. I stretched, feeling the stiffness of old bones and restless sleep, and noticed the soft echo of small footsteps outside the room. My stomach twisted with unease. I hadn't expected anyone else to be awake so early. I opened the door quietly. The hall was bathed in golden sunlight streaming through the windows, dust motes floating lazily in the air. And there he was, a little boy, maybe 6 years old, standing in the hallway, fumbling with his shoelaces. He had dark hair, soft and messy from sleep, and eyes that reflected the same color as mine, an uncanny, almost impossible resemblance. My heart froze. The boy looked up suddenly, and in that instant, I saw it, the face that mirrored my own childhood, the tiny curve of the lips, the faint dimple in the cheek. He was mine. Somehow, after all these years, life had carried this secret in silence, hidden but alive. Aisha appeared behind him, her expression tense. "Don't, he's just, stay back," she said quickly, her voice sharp yet trembling. Her hands were pressed to her sides as if to steady herself. But the truth was already screaming at me in the sunlight, in the boy's hesitant glance, in the way he clutched his small backpack with one hand and the other hovered near his chest. "Aisha," I whispered, my voice breaking. His mine." Her eyes widened in shock, and then she looked away, biting her lip as though restraining herself from saying too much too soon. There was no denial in her gaze, only a deep, quiet pain that cut straight to my soul. "You left," she said finally, her voice trembling. "You disappeared. You didn't call. You didn't ask." I was angry, hurt, and I raised him alone. I swallowed, feeling the weight of her words pressing into me. 7 years of absence, 7 years of missed birthdays, homework struggles, scraped knees, late-night fears, laughter, tears, all of it. And I had no part in it. I had been blind to the life I should have shared. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly, though I already feared the answer. "Because you ran," she replied, her voice sharp now but coated with years of grief and restraint. "You left once, and I couldn't risk you leaving again. Not him. Not us. I had to protect him, and I had to protect myself from hoping for something that would never happen." The boy looked up at us again, his small brow furrowed in confusion. I realized he had no idea what was unfolding in this room, but he could feel the tension. I wanted to reach out, to tell him everything, to make him understand that I was here now. But I didn't. I didn't dare disturb the fragile balance of trust Aisha had built around him. When he scurried down the hallway, pretending not to notice me, Aisha finally let herself breathe. She sat back down, her hands pressed to her eyes, and I could see the tears threatening to spill. "I let you think I moved on," she said softly, almost as if confessing to herself. "I let you think I forgot. That was my revenge. I wanted you to feel what it's like to lose something you didn't even know was yours. I wanted you to understand what leaving does, even years later." The words hit me harder than any anger could. Revenge, through absence, through silence, through endurance. She had carried a lifetime of grief and turned it into a quiet, cutting lesson. I had never felt the sting of loss like this. I just wanted a chance, I whispered, my chest tight, my throat burning with words that could not fully capture my regret. "You had one," she said, voice steady, piercingly calm. 7 years ago." Her words, so soft yet so sharp, cut through me like a blade. I realized that her calmness, the quiet control she held over herself, was far more dangerous than any shout, any anger. This was emotional justice, carefully measured and delivered over time. I looked at her then, really looked at her, and noticed the small signs of her struggle, the tight line of her jaw, the quiver in her fingers, the way she avoided certain parts of the room where the boy might see her emotion. She had survived without me, but at what cost? And yet, despite it all, she had created a life, a home, a love for someone I would never know without returning to the consequences of my choices. I faltered, unable to finish the sentence. I wanted to say I was sorry, I wanted to say I love her. I wanted to cry for the lost years. But none of that felt enough. The damage was there, deep and irreversible, yet there was also a strange tenderness in this confrontation. She had faced the world without me, and yet here she was, allowing me back, even just a glimpse. "You can stay one more night," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. "But tomorrow, you should go. This time, don't leave anything behind." I nodded, understanding that this was both a mercy and a warning. She had already inflicted her subtle, emotional revenge. She had made me feel the emptiness, the absence, the loss of time and love. And she had done it without a single outburst, without a single accusation, only truth, carefully revealed. I sat back, my heart pounding, the weight of the years settling over me. This boy, my son, though I did not yet know how to call him that, was a living reminder of my failures and my love. And Aisha, strong, fierce, and quietly merciless, had shown me what it meant to lose without violence, to hurt with absence, and to wield time itself as a weapon. We sat in silence for a long time. The farmhouse seemed to hold its breath, the dust and the sunbeams dancing like spirits, witnessing the collision of past and present. I realized that some losses are invisible until you see them. Some truths are unbearable until you face them directly. Finally, I spoke, my voice raw but soft. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to be here now without destroying what you've built." She looked at me, her eyes steady now, almost frightening in their clarity. "You don't get to fix it," she said. "You get to live with it. You get to see what happens when someone you love disappears. You get to understand. Fully. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll learn to be better." Her words were a dagger, but they also carried a strange, quiet kindness. She had given me a lesson in love, loss, and responsibility, the most devastating and transformative lesson of my life. I stood, feeling the gravity of it all pressing down on me. I walked to the window, watching the boy play outside, seeing the sunlight catch in his hair, hearing the faint laughter that seemed to carry a lifetime of innocence. And I understood then, my place in this story was no longer as a hero, no longer as a partner in love, but as a witness, a father, a man confronting the consequences of his own choices. Aisha's final words echoed in my mind as I left the room. Some losses you never see coming, until they're standing right in front of you with your own eyes. And now, standing here in the warm morning light, I finally knew what that meant. I had returned, but I had come too late to reclaim what I had lost. All I could do was stand, watch, and learn the weight of absence, the sharp edge of time, and the quiet, unforgettable power of her revenge. The farmhouse was silent again, except for the soft laughter outside. I took a deep breath, feeling the sting of tears, the weight of regret, and the bitter taste of reality. And I realized that some lessons are meant to break you, not just teach you. This was one of them.